Words from Affirmations for Self-Healing by Swami Ananda on our topic this week, courage. There are three kinds of human courage: blind, passive, and dynamic. Blind courage doesn't count the cost until it finds itself faced, horror-stricken, with the bill. Passive courage is the strength of will to adjust to reality, whatever it may be. And dynamic courage is the strength of will not only to accept reality, but to confront it with another reality of one's own making. There is a fourth kind of courage, not human, but divine. Divine courage comes from living in the awareness of God's presence within, and in the realization that He is the sole reality. Live more in Him, for nothing and no one can touch what you really are. Let's affirm together, first in a strong voice, taking control of the conscious mind. I live protected by God's infinite light.
I live protected by God's infinite light.
So long as I remain in the heart of it.
So long as I remain in the heart of it.
Nothing and no one can harm me.
Nothing and no one can harm me.
A little softer now. I live protected by God's infinite light.
I live protected by God's infinite light.
So long as I remain in the heart of it.
So long as I remain in the heart of it.
Nothing and no one can harm me.
Nothing and no one can harm me.
I live protected by God's infinite light. So long as I remain in the heart of it.
So long as I remain in the heart of it.
Nothing and no one can harm me. Now in a whisper, I live protected by God's infinite light. So long as I remain in the heart of it. Nothing and no one can harm me. Now mentally, I live protected by God's infinite light. So long as I remain in the heart of it, nothing and no one can harm me. And now from the spiritual eye, broadcasting the affirmation superconsciously, I live protected by God's infinite light. So long as I remain in the heart of it, nothing and no one can harm me. I live protected by God's infinite light. So long as I remain in the heart of it, nothing and no one can harm me. And pray with me mentally. I look to Thee for my strength, Lord. Hold me closely in Thy arms of love. Then, whatever happens in my life, I shall accept with joy. Om. Peace. Amen. Good morning again, friends.
Morning.
I'm Narayan, and this is Rammurti. And again, our deep thanks to Michel for sharing that beautiful music, that beautiful song. Actually, just the affirmation, so we're held closely in God's arms. I think that's how I felt from that song, being held in Divine Mother's arms. Thank you, Michel. So I'm going to read from Rays of the One Light. These are weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. And this week's topic is perfection is self-transcendence. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. We begin this week with a passage from the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 5. Love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Do good to them that hate you. And pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you? If ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the tax collectors the same? And if ye salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the pagans so? Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect. This continuation of last week's lesson, this is a continuation of last week's lesson. To love all equally is possible only by seeing God everywhere, in others as well as in oneself. See whatever comes to you unasked for as a manifestation of His will. Be grateful for the pains you experience, for they are healing strokes of His love. Sometimes healing is effected only by strong measures, but His love for you is manifested in the very attempt to heal. Strive always to be impersonal, as though whatever happens to you were happening to someone else. Persecution gives us the supreme opportunity to deny the thought, this is happening to me, and to affirm our inner freedom from the thought of ego. Don't allow the negative perceptions of others to become your own self-definition. Seek God. This is the true goal of life. Though how difficult to cling to in the midst of hatred, spite, and persecution. The Bhagavad Gita tells us in the 7th chapter, out of thousands, one strives for spiritual attainment, and out of many blessed true seekers who strive assiduously to reach me, one perhaps perceives me as I am. O truth seeker, be one among all those thousands who seeks the supreme goal. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
How is everyone?
Awake and ready.
How feels everyone?
Awake and ready.
Just wanted to make sure you hadn't lost it. Since Good. I'm going to read Whispers from Eternity. There's one word in here I'm going to comment about because we might not understand it. It's the word vile. And it doesn't have the meaning of evil or filthy. And it doesn't have the meaning of a little glass tube or bottle. But viol is a type of instrument that was very popular in the Renaissance. And we still use it actually for the double bass, like in an orchestra or a jazz trio. We call it a bass viol. And but anyway, so that's what Master's talking about when he says viol. Demand for union with the Almighty. O Father, behold me through the pores of the sky. Smile at me through the twinkling stars. Strengthen me through the sun. Calm my feelings through the moon. Caress me through the breeze. Love me through my love. Throb in me through my heart. Breathe thine immortality through this mortal frame of mine. Speak through my voice. Help others through my hands. Use my mind to inspire them. Breathe through my breath. For within this fragile vial, thou alone canst sing thy complete eternal song. For within this fragile vial, thee alone canst sing thy complete eternal song. In today's reading, Swami's not pulling any punches. He's talking about perfection. That's not a topic that we have every Sunday. Be ye perfect. There are a lot of other good things to say on Sunday morning, but here, this is kind of like, perfection is no easy stroll to the goal, right? This is very challenging. So what is Jesus telling us here? Now, certainly he said to love everyone with God's perfect and unqualified and unconditional love. And this is an incredibly inspiring goal. But we mustn't overlook the fact that he went on then in this passage to give us a new commandment. Now, most of us are familiar, at least somewhat, with the 10 commandments of the Old Testament. If you went to Sunday school, you probably memorized them, or if you went to catechism class. So there's those 10 commandments from the Old Testament, and then we usually think of 2 New Testament commandments: to love the Lord thy God with thy entire being, and to love thy neighbor as thyself. But Jesus snuck in a third one on us here. Be ye perfect. And it is a commandment. It's not like advice or some suggestion, right? It's not a promise or a principle. It's a call to action. It's a command. Jesus was not just counseling his listeners to kind of hang around passively and hope that God would bless them, when he thought he had enough grace to do it or something. No, Jesus is telling us to put forth great effort so that we might strive mightily for perfection, so that we could be in a position to receive God's grace on this quest when it comes to us. He's commanding us to rise above our human limitations. You've heard people say, perhaps, to someone, you really should get over yourself. And as I was thinking about this topic, I realized there are 2 interpretations of that the Swami is talking about. One is we need to get over ourselves in the sense that we need to rise above who we are right now and what we are. And by rising above our everyday version of ourself, like soaring above our average energy par, going to the next level of willingness, we can move and make progress toward perfection. And also, the other more obvious interpretation is just to get over ourselves by letting go of all those egoic qualities, our little self, our likes, our dislikes, our tendencies and foibles, planting the habits and the thoughts that we need to grow if we're going to fulfill the potential of our soul. I was looking around on the internet for jokes about perfection. And there are no positive jokes about perfection. Every one of them was negative. It was putting the idea of perfection down or ridiculing the people who tried to be perfect. So much for my joke for the opening of the Sunday service. But I stumbled around and ended up on jokes on mistakes, which there is a relationship, like perfection is a state beyond mistakes, right? And there was one quote there that I had to share because I thought it was very fun. This fellow said, "I have learned so much from my mistakes that I've decided to make a lot more of them." But as we look at perfection, as Swami's referring to it here, he's talking about a lot more than just a succession of missteps, miscues. We have to think in terms of rising to an altogether different level than we exist in today. And perhaps the key to this is perhaps the key to what Jesus is saying in this passage is that he is actually telling us not just something to aspire to, but he's giving the message of who we truly are, that we actually are perfect. And now is the time to begin to realize that perfection. Now, of course, we may not feel that way. We don't feel perfect very often. In fact, we may have no sense of wholeness or completeness at certain times. But that's because we don't understand who we really deeply are. It's in our own nature to want to be perfect, our deep nature, to seek fulfillment. It's the way that we're made to pursue that sense of completeness and perfection until we have at last found ourselves at rest, at peace, whole, in Divine Mother's arms. And we wonder, well, how can it even be that we ought to be perfect? And Jesus gives us a clue right there as he's giving us the commandment when he says, be therefore perfect, even as your Father, which is in heaven, is perfect. Because God is our Father. We are his children. We are part of him. He lives in us. And we are the manifestation of his godness just in human form. So if he is perfect, we too are perfect. Even if we haven't yet exhibited that in our human lives, in our daily lives. For this is what we truly are, perfected beings who have gotten very distracted by a lot of attractions in the world that have pulled us outside of ourselves. Other than that, we're perfect. And you all are on this journey, or you wouldn't be here today, right? That's what you're doing here, is trying to move towards your own higher self, your perfection. We long to claim our birthright. The Indian scriptures tell us that we've already spent millions of lives on this journey to perfection. But Yogananda tells us that now we're getting pretty close. Or he said, you've heard this before, I'm sure, it takes very, very, very good karma even to want to know God. So we're all in that, right? So we're getting close. Now, how can we rise to that next level? That next level of realization that can eventually lead us to perfection. Perfection comes to us by inner communion with God. Perfection comes to us by inner communion. Why? Because inner communion is the way to get to know God. And as we get to know God, we become more attuned with the divine. And that attunement is the key to realizing our own perfection. Attuning ourselves with perfection in the divine. Paramahansa Yogananda and Jesus Christ both not only agreed on this, but they emphasized inner communion, as have many other masters. We move toward perfection by attuning our will to God's will through that inner communion. And how can we do that? We need to become close enough to God. And then we are on our way to perfection. Yogananda declared that inner communion should become our way of life, a habitual attitude of mind, and not just a practice once a day. Shocking, I know. I mean, practicing meditation once or twice a day is a great beginning. But Yogananda is clearly saying, that's great, but that's not enough. Not to reach that final goal of perfection. Catherine Kairave lives at Ananda Village. In fact, she's the author of one of our Crystal Clarity books, 2 Souls, 4 Lives, which if you're interested in such things, you really should get, because there's a little side commercial here, because it's it's about the former lives of Yogananda and Swami Kriyananda, and especially focuses on his life when he was William the Conqueror. But anyway, that's very interesting. So anyway, Catherine tells of her parents' experience with a modern saint whose name is Frank Laubach. And he was guest at the college where her parents were studying, preparing to become missionaries. And he was asked to pray at the opening of one of their sessions. And they described maybe several of their sessions, because he was there as a guest teacher. He was a missionary too. But they described the way he prayed as though he just started speaking in mid-conversation, almost mid-sentence. They would ask him to pray, and he would be in the middle of talking to God already. And he would just make audible what his inner dialogue was with God. And he would continue this conversation for a little while and then just go back to his private conversation with God, just stop speaking aloud. But he was clearly continuing the conversation. Well, Frank Laubach was a missionary to the Philippines, and he'd been there 14 or 15 years when he got called to this little island where the people were quite primitive and had locked in rituals and ceremonies. And he was there, I'm not sure for how long, but many months, if not a couple of years, and just got nowhere. Not one person could he interest in the love of Jesus that he had gone to teach about. So he decided, well, this is not happening, so I need to do something with my time. And for some years, he'd been considering this experiment. And he decided now is the time, my work is not productive. And so he began trying to line up his actions with the will of God by checking in with God every 15 to 30 minutes. Is this right? Is this what you want? Is this what you want me to say? Is this what you want me to do? Is this where you want me to go? And within 2 years, he was trying to live every waking moment listening for the answer to that question. And I haven't read that he didn't write it that I know of, but my guess is he was no longer forming the question. The question, he was living the question, but listening every moment for that divine response about what was next. Father, what do you desire said? Father, what do you desire done this minute? So this experiment in consciousness, in moment-by-moment communion with God, changed his life and made him a different being. And that's what he was practicing when years later he went to this missionary college and prayed for them. He just shared that. Interestingly, the tribal people became much, much more open to him as he developed in this, and his consciousness shifted, and they could tell that, and they became very open, much more open to what he was teaching. Well, eventually, we must become perfect. So, any resistance, any self-definition, any self-limitation, any condition on our growth, any condition on our happiness, any fantasy we play out, sooner or later, we have to give it up. We have to surrender it. And it may be more challenging than we expect. Maybe not. Maybe we know how difficult it's going to be. But it's not about belief. It's not about self-discipline. It's not about being good. It's not about fairness. All of these ways that we hold ourselves and define ourselves, Divine Mother may just rip them away from us as we continue to journey on our path. And so even though there are often painful tests and trials, we eventually learn that these external concepts are not who we are. They're not a part of our true selves. And as we let them go, our perfection begins to move forward. Divine Mother expects us to release all eventually. How quickly can we give up the parts of ourselves that we cling to? How quickly can we surrender? Embrace the great perfect being that we truly are? Eventually. Why not now? For within this fragile vial, thou alone can sing thy complete, eternal, and can I add, perfect song.
When human hopes toward thee aspire, dark woods of grief are set afire. Beyond all reach of earthly skill, thy love alone our hearts can fill. Christ light that shone on earth from heaven, open for us the inner door. To all who love, the gift is given, joy and freedom evermore. Christ light that shone on earth from heaven, open for us the inner door. To all who love, the gift is given, joy and freedom evermore.
Oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful. At thy feet, oh, I do bow. At thy feet, oh, I do bow. Oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful, oh God, beautiful. In the forest thou art green.
He said, I probably should have told you about this. I apologize. There's a real yogi master in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I said, Milwaukee? And he said, known for beer and baseball. So I said, what's his name? He said, his name is Dr. George. Does he have a last name? Does he have a phone number, address? I said, how do you know he's real? He said, my wife had a terminal illness. And in 1958, I took the train down to Milwaukee, and I asked Dr. George to pray for her. And George made me sit there, and we meditated for 2 hours. And he touched me on the forehead right here, and he said, your wife will be whole. And he got on the train, and on the way back, Ed told me that every time he closed his eyes, he saw a white cross in front of his spiritual eye. Ed was very Christian. So his wife was healed. So I said, that's it for me. So I left St. Paul at about 8 o'clock in the evening, and I drove all the way to Milwaukee, about 350 miles. I just love Dr. George. I just love him so much. So anyway, as I'm driving along, I'm thinking, I'm free.
Yogi, thou art bliss. O God, beautiful.